All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining. This is the Mediaocean Current, our quarterly webinar series. I'm Aaron Goldman. I am not ad tech god, although the pillow behind me is there to confuse you. Very pleased to be with you here today. We are going to focus on the 2025 advertising outlook. So this is based on our most recent research. We've got some great speakers and insights for you. Before we start, I just want to quickly acknowledge the situation in California, send our love and support to everyone in the community who's been impacted. There's been a lot of great work from our community to rally together. In particular, the Ad Council has been really helpful, and I encourage you to seek out those resources and contribute it in any way you can as we are here on behalf of Mediaocean. No elegant segue from that, but let's go ahead and introduce our guests. First up, we have Brian Wieser, who's the prolific principal at Madison and Wall, strategic consultancy for the media and tech industries. If you're not a customer, Madison and Wall produces great reports, excellent Substack, podcast, which I hear Deborah is slated to appear on coming up, and a whole lot more. So before that, Brian was global president at Group M. And then before that, EVP for Magna Global under IPG. He also served his time in ad tech, so he paid his dues. He was at Simul Media, and then he was a Wall Street analyst for Pivotal and Deutsche Bank. Brian wrote the foreword for our report, so he'll be sharing some of his thoughts on top of our data as we go here. And next up is Deborah Wahl, who is a Forbes Hall of Fame CMO, former global CMO for General Motors. She led their transformation to electric and share perspective on how our research can be applied and some of the imperatives for marketers as we enter into the year ahead. Also at GM, her remit included customer experience, and I think that can be an area we can delve into a little bit, especially in the context of AI. Before GM, Deborah was CMO for the US at McDonald's. She held a number of senior marketing roles at Chrysler, Toyota, Ford, and Mazda. So she is auto to the core, repping Detroit. She's also a member of the Mediaocean Board of Directors. So a bit of a disclaimer there. And then as for me, yep, I not ad tech god, still not ad tech god. Lead global marketing across our family of brands, which you see over here, including Prisma, Flash Talking, Protected, and I'm knocking on wood, very soon we'll be welcoming Innovid to the Mishpacha. So yes, thanks again, Deb and Brian, for being here. Welcome. I'm just going to walk everyone through kind of the methodology, and then we'll be keen to get your take on some of these trends. So as a reminder for folks, this is now the seventh in our biannual series of reports. We canvass the marketing community, try to get a pulse on what's happening in the industry. We've been using TechValidate to conduct the research. That platform is actually being sunset this year, but fear not, SurveyMonkey has other solutions for us, so we won't miss a beat. And we appreciate everybody who participated in this research. So the survey was conducted in November. We had almost 700 respondents across a pretty wide cross-section of industry verticals. You can see here, no one category represents more than 15% of the total, with tech at the top, then entertainment, CPG, retail, followed by auto, healthcare, FinServe, D2C, telco, rounding it out, travel, QSR, EDU. So I do want to call out, we'll be publishing bespoke reports for each of these sectors. So keep an eye out for those coming later this month. And now on with the show. So these are the 6 key insights that bubbled up from our research. We'll go through them one at a time, both here on this slide and then in separate sections as we go through the presentation. The first is on ad spend, with marketers continuing to prioritize digital channels, so probably no surprise there. The second is AI overtaking CTV to become the top consumer trend. The third is automation becoming the fastest rising investment. Number 4, focus on preparing for a multi-ID future. The fifth on ad verification, with actionability being the biggest growing concern there. And then number 6, creative media gap, which we've seen slightly shrinking in each subsequent survey we've done, but it's still prevalent, so big opportunities there. So as I said, we're going to kind of parse these one at a time, but maybe let's bring Brian and Deb here to, I guess maybe just start with Any surprises at a high level about what's going on here? Any glaring omissions that aren't showing up? I guess, as you think about the year ahead and what's set to have the biggest impact, what's popping out at you? And Brian, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. I would say that generally speaking, the priorities that were listed were certainly among those I would have expected to see, because one thing that's come up very consistently in the work that we've done is just how much marketers are focused, if not fixated, on something resembling performance, even at the expense of brand building and independent of the importance of brand building. And when you think about everything through that lens, especially when you think about the larger markets that certainly Mediaocean would be more typically working with, anything that supports those performance-based initiatives, all of which, I think almost everything here is consistent with that. Even the creative media gap, it's based on what I would argue is a flawed notion of efficiency. The notion of separating functions and then optimizing trees rather than forests, independent of, again, what the right choice is. But the one thing that was missing that I think is most critical and that I thought was underemphasized in the survey, or at least marketers who said this, I think they're missing out, political and advocacy issues, by which I mean nothing will impact the year ahead like what starts on Monday. Positive or negative from your vantage point, depending on who you are. But I think when you look at the barometer I'm looking at is just how does the advertising industry grow? And we can talk about all those elements, but net negative. But with that said, different industries may fare differently. But I think the uncertainty, which is the most critical thing, because nobody really knows, A, what's actually going to be policy, and B, what's actually going to be implemented and how, and all the knock-on effects and all that stuff. It will, pardon the phrase, trump everything else.
Yeah, well, I'll say the uncertainty is wreaking havoc in this house here. We've got I've got 3 kids who have made sure to download. They've downloaded all their TikToks, all their saved drafts, just in case. But back to the advertising implications. Deb, how about from your perspective, reacting to some of these top level themes here?
Well, first of all, again, thanks also for having me, and always great to be on with Brian. Happy New Year, everyone. Here's what I got from this. I would say buckle up, marketers. It's going to be another one of those years. We keep hoping that eventually our industry will sort of, get to a nice place of consistency and maybe some predictability. And what I saw from these key insights, and also as we get into that there are still so many conflicting trends that we need to resolve. We saw ad spending go to digital, but I didn't see anyone taking down. They were maintaining traditional media. So, we'll talk about that a lot more as we go in. I think what we see is there's still desire, in my opinion, probably way too much, like for churn, and still going after that idea of how are we going to be incredibly efficient and really know. A lot of promise with AI, exciting, but also terrifying, and a lot to learn there. So I think it also shows that as marketers, there are a lot of areas where skill sets need to continue to develop. We need to continue to look at structure and organization to how do we deploy all this. So overall, I think it's going to be another, we're all in marketing because we love excitement and change and ever-ending challenges. And I think this year promises to bring all of those.
Indeed, yes. And great perspective in thinking about how you take all these things in stride, right? The need to remain agile and flexible as ever becomes the imperative. And to the point you made around thinking through spend and where it's going, you'll see very quickly here in our first insight that marketers are prioritizing digital, but I think you mentioned they're still maintaining traditional channels. And so this isn't a situation of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Actually, I don't know if that's a phrase we still use these days. I don't even know the origin of the phrase. That would be an interesting wormhole to go down, but we'll save that for another time. So when looking at this was that first insight. So we asked folks for each media channel if they're expecting to increase, decrease, or maintain their spend for the coming year. And so here we can see social is the top grower with 68% saying they'll be increasing there. Next is digital display and video with 67%, and then CTV at 55%. And, in hindsight, we've been doing this now every 6 months for 7 periods. In hindsight, maybe we would have parsed video out from display, because some people think and manage those things differently. Video and CTV are really converging as a category, but for the sake of being able to get our year over year, we have to keep the categories the same. So just a quick point on that. After that, we have search and retail media. And then another one we probably should have broken out of home and digital out of home, growing overall, but likely over indexing on the DOOH side of it. I still love that acronym. Dope. And then we have the channels that where more people are decreasing than increasing. And so that's radio. And again, here, in ideal world, you break out digital audio. But there's tension, because we want people to be thinking about these not as silos, and acting on them and thinking about the consumer first, who doesn't differentiate between all these things. But from a research perspective, it sure would be cleaner. So at any rate, and then national TV, local TV, and print. And to the point that was made, all these channels have more people maintaining spend than decreasing it. So the picture is actually pretty healthy for these formats too. So maybe starting again with you, Brian. What jumps out at you here? And I know these are trends you track, closely as well. So how does what we're seeing here kind of mirror your projections?
Well, the main thing to be mindful of, I think, when you're interpreting this, or when anyone is interpreting this, is it's really hard to isolate the like-for-like marketer spend versus what will actually happen, because there can be non-like-for-like catalysts to growth or decline, for that matter. And retail media, for example, is a great example. I don't doubt that the typical marketer that's based in the US will increase or try to increase their spending on retail media, independent of the political environment. But so much of what we call retail media is dependent on cross-border advertising, meaning Chinese or even Vietnamese-based marketers, manufacturers, buying ads in the United States, shipping cross-border. That is some of the most at-risk activity from a marketing perspective, probably not captured in the survey, or it's hard to, because it's kind of a totally different segment that drives a lot of the growth and possible downside too.
Yeah, a great call. And also worth pointing out too here that, our audience for this survey, the Mediaocean community, is largely going to over-index to bigger brands, enterprise marketers, and not capture the long tail, the SMB segment. And within there, you're going to have your own sort of ebbs and flows too. Deborah, how about you? What, when thinking about kind of your peers in brand marketing and how they approach budget allocation, does this jive with your kind of conventional wisdom around the channels, the growers, the winners, the losers?
Yeah, I think it does. I think, though, to what Brian brought up before with the uncertainty that's going to happen, I'm not surprised to see the social platforms as the highest amount of growth, but I think there could be an enormous amount of flux, nimbleness, and agility that's going to be required to follow all that. Now, we know that, following influencers, they're probably the most entrepreneurial, agile group of channels that we have, so they will end up somewhere if something happens with TikTok or not. So I think, it'll be up to everyone to be very nimble and following that, and be able to keep your spends and commitments in an agile form, so so that you can make sure that you can be very reactive to some of these big things this year. I'm glad, of course, to still see CTV. I'm a big fan of that. I'm excited about it. I'll put a plug in for Mediaocean. I'm excited about the Innovid acquisition there and partnership, because I think it is going to really provide a group that's very objective across all channels. So that's a good thing for how we do this. And as you see digital spend increasing, that's also a really good thing. We have to keep having a way to look at all those channels together and commensurately in terms of what they produce and find. So I think overall, it does signal a pretty robust market for next year. So I maintain my original position. It's going to be very exciting, and we're going to have to all stay on our toes.
Here. And thank you for the plug. Since you broke the seal on that, I'll also shill a little for our social platform, which started with 4C, where I came from, and now it's been integrated into Flash Talking. And what we have, of course, is an ad manager that allows you to, through one central console, manage your campaigns all the way down to the ads and bids and budget level and creative across all the social platforms. So to the point about needing to remain agile, as things go with TikTok here, we can quickly move in and out and allocate, whether it's across Meta or Snap, or we have LinkedIn, we have Pinterest, we have Reddit and Google Demand Gen as well. So a lot of opportunity to be able to shift budget as it goes, but we'll see how it plays out. And then maybe just if we think about this on a long, so these were, we asked for the coming year. If we try to fast forward a little bit, and Brian, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah.
You know, do you see anything changing, the trends continuing if we look out maybe even on a 5-year horizon?
Well, I think that broadly speaking, take CTV, for example, it's just a subset of television. So to the extent that you believe that television is, unfortunately for TV owners, positioned to just decline on an ongoing basis in its entirety as an advertising medium, then eventually so too will CTV. The other thing is that you could argue that if you only looked at CTV on a, say, percentage of ad inventory perspective, there's significant overspending in CTV right now on a like-for-like basis. Now, there could be reasons to explain why it should be proportionally higher, but there could be a lot of spending that might pull back as marketers rationalize, shall we say. So that's just one example. It does feel, though, that broadly the digital platforms or anything that provides performance will generally take share on an ongoing basis. There's nothing to get in the way of that. The other moving part that's hard to capture, again, in any possible surveys is, if you assume that the AI-based platforms that today, the Metas, the Googles, Amazons as well are starting to offer, if they become dominant, what does that mean? Like, if marketers start allocating across these AI-based platforms first and foremost, then I think it's entirely possible that just changes the definition of what medium is.
Yeah, and what happens when ads start appearing on those AI agents and apps themselves too? Perplexity already has it.
Exactly.
ChatGPT is coming.
Exactly.
What is that? Does that cannibalize? Is it from paid search? Is it retail media? Does it matter? Right? If as long as you're there. I've been starting to adapt the mantra. We used to say that ad spend always follows time spent. Right, that was the Mary Meeker slide every year,
Well,
right? And
unfortunately, Mary Meeker was wrong.
Yes, exactly. It follows money spent. It follows where the consumers are transacting and the point of, and getting as close to that point of purchase as you can.
I'd argue, and this is an important way to look at it, time and money are related inside of media. This is where Mary got it wrong. It's not related across media.
That's a great point. And that's why I think you're seeing, CTV potentially outpacing there. Within it, you have the interactivity, the performance-based options, a lot of the shop. It's now become, in a sense, a shoppable platform,
right?
Which linear never was.
Nope, that's fair.
I want to challenge Brian with one thing.
Sure.
Because, your statement reminded me. Okay, so I'm going to take everyone back to 2005. Young marketer Deborah Wahl. I was on a panel with all the heads of the cable networks. And I was like, 2005, you're going to be out of, there's no way cable's surviving. It's it's terrible. And look at these spends still and where they are. It's not completely dead yet, but it's now, 20 years later and still viable for certain things. So my challenge is your prediction is probably right, but it's so much slower than we always think about all these changes. And if CTV can adapt beyond just TV, it'll be interesting, those same, which I'm sure it will.
I just always make the point that, again, the first thing that always stood out to me back to the Mary Meeker slides was, so wait, the time and money are supposed to equate to each other. So explain to me the whole radio thing. Like, radio's massive. And the share, you're saying because time and money are equivalent, therefore internet will grow, but why not radio?
Yeah, it's
The
great.
logic doesn't hold.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forget the exact quote, but it's something like we tend to underestimate the impact, of a new technology or a new trend, but we overestimate, how quickly it'll arrive. So
And
you
this
got to
is why I'll
balance
put in a
those.
plug for Brian. Everyone should be following Brian because he constantly brings these points up, and some of your latest columns have been amazing. So
Thank you.
All right, so let's just quickly look. There's a slice here of that same question that we broke down by vertical, and so here you can see for each channel, for each industry, which channel was reported to be the fastest growing. You can see most are social, so kind of mirrors what we saw. A few are digital display and video, and a couple CTV, and so, maybe back to social for a second. Auto's right at the top. These are alphabetical. But Deborah, with your background in that space, how are auto manufacturers? How's the entire industry thinking about social and the opportunity there?
yeah, well, I think this is one of it's almost like where are you now and how much opportunity do you have? So in auto, it's always been more challenging to crack the social platforms fully. You can follow people, but if you're really, it depends how we're thinking of the social. Is it just buying ads on social, or is it really influencer marketing? Like, where do you go from there? So I think on both sides, there's a lot of opportunity. And it's interesting right now with AI allowing so much more um, data analytics on your audiences and your customer base. It's helping everyone more quickly define and follow and then see where those are. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I would definitely be endorsing that if I had an auto budget right now, because that seems to be where there's the most opportunity and it's very effective.
Cool. All right, let's roll on to insight number 2. This is on consumer trends. And as I mentioned in the preview, AI has now jumped up to the top, which should probably surprise no one. 63% chose Gen AI, followed by CTV at 56%. For those stats nerds out there, this was a select all that apply question. And then TikTok social video was next at 51%, e-commerce everywhere, consumer privacy, gaming, metaverse, bringing up the rear. Political and advocacy trends, Brian, you would call that earlier as something that's actually set to have a big impact. I have a feeling based on our timing when we asked this question, November timeframe, maybe there was some burnout after the US election. People thought, all right, I was spending a lot around in the run up to it. Now I'm just going to take a mental break from it. So perhaps that's what's behind it, but maybe not actually make that assumption. And Brian, ask you for your take on that, or just anything we're seeing here with this one.
I mean, it could also be that this speaks to the idea that brands themselves do not themselves want to be seen to be advocating. Fair enough.
Got it. Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that political and advocacy trends aren't going to be dominant this year. So I guess I'd flag that.
Yeah, good call.
How dangerous do you think these are going to be, Brian? Like, in the past few years, if a marketer made a misstep and called it wrong on some of these, there were a lot of consequences. What are you seeing?
My general view is that brands, you either define yourself or let others define you. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems that we've seen. I did a study of sorts when I was at Group M. I wanted to understand what did advertising look like in Quebec in the 1970s, in Ireland during the Troubles, and in Spain during the 1930s?
Oh my God.
And what did marketers do? And it was best put by one of my former Irish colleagues who was around at the time. And he quoted from the poem, "Whatever you say nothing," was the dominant view. And marketers just tried to stay away from this stuff. And what I noted was the distinction between then and now is that in a mass media world, you could basically try to control your narrative. In a world with social media, good luck. If you're not defining what your brand stands for, you will always risk others defining yourself for you. And then good luck reversing it. And I'd estimate that of the top 100 brands, every year, maybe 5 will find themselves in a situation where they're either the subject, victim, or otherwise, they're involved unwillingly. And if they didn't previously establish what it is that they stand for, what they stand for will be defined by other people. And it doesn't matter what it is that they stand for, really. I mean, pick a few things that you stand for. I would argue is that what every brand should be doing.
Yeah, we just ran an analysis of the Christmas ads in the UK. So for that region, like that's their Super Bowl, like all the biggest budgets and energy goes into Christmas ads. And we saw the pendulum swing back towards much more focus on like product attributes versus kind of social advocacy or even just tugging at the heartstrings and emotion as we had seen it in years past. And wondering if that's kind of like a harbinger of things to come for our Super Bowl. And if people play it more,
they'll play it safe. They'll play it safe.
Yeah.
But I'm making the point that everyone knows kind of what Chick-fil-A stands for. Everyone knows what Ben and Jerry stands for. They can appeal to people who don't agree with those philosophies, but you know what they stand for. And I think that more marketers should follow suit.
Does that resonate for you? I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I love this point. And first of all, I want to read your study because I'm fascinated by that. And I think we all have to understand what happens in these fraught times. But it's really interesting because you've seen in all of this, although this is kind of media spend focus, but the idea of brand keeps declining as performance has gone up. But performance doesn't put a focus normally on understanding who our brand is and making sure that that is really strong. I mean, it's easier to get lost unless you're really tightly managing it. So I love that point, and it's probably the most important thing that I think about. How do you have the resources and make sure you're establishing that for the company and then all your constituents and then and your consumer base, that people really understand and know, and how do you get the right budget to spend on that? Because it's strategic thinking. It's the heavy work.
What is a brand except a promise that's meant to be fulfill an expectation, right? And the reason why strong brands outperform over the long run is because these promises are baked into everything else.
Yeah.
And I think that back to the advocacy thing, and it doesn't have to be advocacy in a conventionally political way, but it's just the things that you want to be known for and stand for, whatever that is, are things that are so critical to part of that brand promise.
Yeah, and my last point, I would just add on that, there was so much talk on brand purpose, which really, in a way, got out of control. It started to have nothing to do with the core business because of brand's purpose is all about what's the value that your products are bringing that are different than anyone else. So I think if everyone gets back to that real focus and establishing what it is, what a brand does and offers, and really knows that tightly, that will make a big difference next year and help to make sure you're not one of those top 5 brands. And I agree with you. Everyone's got to be prepared because you just never know when something will hit.
I'm going to try and tie that into AI because as we think about the opportunities with AI for helping in the development of ads, there's considerations, is probably putting it mildly. But if there were a way to break down the brand into attributes and really codify it to a point that like an AI could understand it and then make decisions about what to put, what not to put in an ad, that's almost the level of thinking that, you need to do to understand. Like if you can get to that level, then you've got an innate understanding of how you want your brand represented. Now you still may get some hallucinations and, some things that you wouldn't want to ever put live, but if you can sort of work backwards through that and get the right assets and tagging and prompts to be able to get you there, it can almost be a good healthy exercise to see how well do we, we used to just put together, there was the brief for the brand guidelines or, the brand Bible, and that gets handed off to the creatives to go to town. Now we're moving in this direction of AI and automation. And the question is, how can you train it to understand and pick up on those things that were so intangible in the past? And so I'm going to advance here and talk about, and then give you all a chance to respond quick to that. This just shows the trends by vertical. And so once again, Gen AI looks like it was leading for pretty much all of them, CTV, and then DDC, direct to consumer. Looks like TikTok and social video. Maybe we'll come back to that. But in terms of how you're currently using Gen AI, the top use cases remain data analysis and market research. We've seen this steady since we started asking this question, followed by copywriting and image generation. So, what's happening here? Are brands not ready to kind of, turn the creative over to AI? What's your take on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, my thought, we're not ready yet. I mean, the models aren't, they haven't matured enough yet to turn it fully over. And I think that's why you're probably seeing, some of this not grow as quickly. I still think we're in the fledgling time too of figuring out what really makes a difference. Where's the ROI going to come from? It's an enormous investment across the board, and we all need to use it. The reports back that I get from people is that, it's really helping in areas of efficiency, qualifying people immediately, producing docs faster, doing audience segmentation faster, things like that, that really also create much more efficiency, is where there's tangible, really benefits that you can quantify. And then I think we get better. I always remember, training vehicles or anything to drive autonomously or do any of this. It's like you're starting at, age 12, and then you have to constantly bring it up to the next stage and learn more.
Yeah. Brian, what's your take?
Yeah, I think that certainly everything Deb said is accurate. I think that at the same time, there's a legal consideration in terms of going further right now. I think that, we back to the podcast, one of the podcasts we have, Agency Business with Olivia Morley. We just had Joanne Davis on, and we talked about pitch consultants right now, what they're seeing. The idea that in pitches, they're creating, there is now a job of the AI prompt engineer, but there's also a job for creative lawyers, meaning the idea of a lawyer or legal team who is specialized on focusing on AI-related issues in advertising. And I think that's something that still needs to be resolved for more marketers before a lot of this stuff becomes more pervasive. Back to the premise that AI can actually be a boon for jobs in addition to eliminating jobs.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing, if we're in the crawl, walk, run, I think we're walking now at this point. And in particular, like with Flash Talking, as we introduce more Gen AI tools into the creative workflow, there's still guardrails that need to be on. There's still kind of I like how publicists called it, an HI component, human on top of the AI. And so as we release these, things, there's, I think maybe it was Coca-Cola, and actually maybe it was their UK Christmas ad that was done, all by AI, and it actually, it looked like a great ad when they disclosed it was all AI. Then all of a sudden, people started to judge it, and the question is, there's things about disclosure, right, and what needs to happen there, and then there's questions about just, when people will just generally get comfortable and embrace. And so these are, as we move through that continuum, and we can look at it here on the next slide in terms of by vertical, exact same across the board. It's analysis, market research are the use cases that people are most comfortable with. And so when you think about where it's augmenting the humans versus replacing some of the functions, in this case, if you can use AI to take a chart and help you analyze the trends, which, spoiler alert, we did, with some of our research here. It really allows you to just keep your energy focused on the higher value things that is great in the domain of human, and creativity is one of those things that is super powerful, and frankly becoming a more and more important variable to campaign success as we've kind of hit that curve of diminishing returns on things like audience targeting and bidding. It's the creative now that's the separation.
The
Let's
other
jump
thing
into
that
our.
was interesting.
Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, Aaron. I just
Please.
didn't see, we had talked so much about it being very helpful in customer service with the AI chatbots and everything. I was surprised not to see that as a bigger part, and didn't show up in any of these industry categories. And I'm not sure if that's because the perception for marketers is they've kind of narrowed their remit, and that's a different team that's doing it, or if it's just not working as well. So, I don't know if anyone's heard anything on that side, but thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it seems like in the early applications of it are, the simple chatbots that are the first line of defense, when there's an angry customer. And so again, it's the same type, like it's can be a self-fulfilling prophecy if you're throwing that as a use case against some of the thorniest challenges for your business. Okay, it might not come out as a great success case study versus thinking the places where it can give you a level up, and a step change. So we'll see that, I'm sure, continue to innovate. All right. So number 3, automation. This was the fastest rising investment. So when we look at the data, you'll see it wasn't the top one that popped, but it rose the fastest. So up 17% since our last survey. So number 1 here remains performance-driven media. That was also our number 1 from last time, although it went down a little from 69 to 62%. Then you have measurement and attribution, which dropped slightly, 53% to now to 50. And the biggest drop was actually brand advertising, went from 57 to 45%. So definitely a movement towards the bottom of the funnel as we approach this year in the context of the macro climate and some of the uncertainty we've pointed out. Brian, kind of what does this tell you about the state of affairs? You touched on agencies and workflow there. How can, what can this mean for the ways they work with and ultimately build their clients?
Well, yeah, and I think the expectation of ongoing improvement of process is kind of the point, and it does overlap directly with AI and the role of AI. I think of AI as just more automation, frankly. So the idea that marketers need to expect that their partners, whether media owners or agencies or anyone else, can do whatever they did last year for hopefully 5% less next year or 10% less next year is kind of the starting point. So because they need to free up resources to do other new things. And that presents opportunity for anyone selling, which is to say, come up with new stuff to capitalize on that freed up resource. But meanwhile, always drive down the like for like cost for the work you're currently doing.
And Deborah, is that how you think about it? And what are some of those opportunities for what automation helps free up the brain power for?
Oh, well, I mean, that would be like the core part of our work that no one really wants to do. If we could continue to just find more efficient ways to do that. And I agree with Brian, like, at least a minimum of 5% improvement in efficiency every year, minimum. So you've just got to push that. I actually thought automation, even though it's the fastest growing, like that should be even higher because there are just a lot of repetitive tasks and a lot of things that I think the industry over a whole could get better at. And again, if we worked as a whole, as an industry, we'd probably, instead of having to do everything individually by every company and every agency, there's a lot more opportunity there. The biggest thing I was thinking about when I saw this is interesting that performance-driven media came back a little bit. Is that just because so much investment has been made, people now need to harvest their investments in building all their core tech stack and everything, or what's happening there? Because you'll see later, I mean, people are still not happy with their measurements. So it's an interesting dichotomy. And then to our earlier discussion about brand, to me, this cries out that I don't know how people define brand advertising in their heads. They might be thinking of big videos or Super Bowl or I don't know what. But to me, maybe there's an opportunity to redefine for everyone's senior leadership teams and CEOs and CFOs what brand advertising really is. Because it's got to be that investment in knowing who we are and what we're about and making sure that that is crystal clear everywhere. So that's one thought I had. Like teams might want to think about redefining the meaning of brand advertising.
Yeah, here. All right, number 4 was around this multi-ID feature. This came from a question about the largest areas of concern that people had in their media and marketing initiatives. And so in this case, we're highlighting the biggest decliner. which is a lack of preparation, lack of preparedness for a cookieless future. So that went from 39% in our last survey down to 31% here. So we're kind of at an interesting inflection point, right? Where Google has changed course on cookie deprecation. It's pivoting to an opt-out mechanism. They also just changed their policies around fingerprinting to be a little more relaxed in the use there. So kind of taken in whole, this means, all right, cookies are going to be around for the foreseeable future. And so marketers are going to need multiple ways to resolve identity and do things like addressing the top concern here, which you had highlighted, Deb, measuring campaign effectiveness across channels. So maybe let's start quickly with Brian's hot take on kind of what's going on with Google and the cookie apocalypse. It's no longer apocalypse. And then if you want to wade into also what's going on with them in terms of the antitrust, let's just get your take on all things Google, Brian.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the path forward is going to be that just gradually it just goes away. And I think that, this trying to, the approach that Google's taking where they try to actually involve regulators and involve the industry just didn't work. So I don't know. I think marketers are still going to have to prepare for this world sooner rather than later with where cookies are just not a thing. It's not like anyone ever thought they were that great to start. And so we definitely hear from where we sit, marketers continuously investing in building up their own first-party data wherever possible. They want to use more data wherever possible, and ideally higher quality data wherever possible. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. On the antitrust issue, or the whatever happens to Google in the coming years at a corporate level, I've held this view for a long time that they will effectively self-deport the ad tech business, meaning at least they will. Sure, government may or may not win, and it could take years and years and years. It just ties them up forever. It seems like an inevitable outcome that one or more significant governments around the world will cause them to have to do that. And at some point, if you're Google, you'd rather control your own fate to some degree. So it's always seemed, and to be clear, I've held this view for many, many years, so it hasn't happened yet, that they will just voluntarily break up parts of their business and separate parts of the ad tech space in particular. In what shape? Hard to say. I think there's political calculations as much as commercial ones, but it's gone on this long. It could also just wait until some significant government, whether US or EU, does something, and that's years away before that happens and appeals play out.
Yeah, well, certainly, our thesis from a Mediaocean perspective, dating back to 1967, is independent ad tech is what helps the industry, all stakeholders win, and so if there becomes an independent piece of the Google stack that gets spun out. Certainly, you think about maybe a combination of a flash talking and an Innovid from an ad serving and other value prop perspective. That's ultimately the idea of that combination, is to be able to provide a competitive alternative. And we believe that independence allows for true focus on the ultimate customer KPIs with no conflict, no bias. And so we would certainly welcome that outcome. Deborah, any thoughts on, you think about if we want to take this a little more broadly into how you have walled gardens, you have open environments, you have first-party data, third-party data. As you kind of think about how those pieces come together, what's important for you here?
So I have to say, when I went through this first time, I was incredibly depressed on behalf of all marketers for that. Number one became an even larger concern this year. I mean, so many of us have invested enormous amounts of dollars in infrastructure, in partnerships, in all of this, and in all the discussions with tech platforms and our social partners. So we shouldn't be still seeing a concern about a decline. So therefore, I would say, all right, step back. What is happening? All I can say is that, from my perspective now, looking at this from the opposite side, I still see an enormous amount of churn in advertisers who are always like changing in and out their tech stacks and trying to figure out still what works and what's the best way. we all know that ANA, MMA have done enormous work to try to bring the industry together to negotiate with some of these partners to make sure that there is more visibility. But yet this seems to indicate that people aren't feeling that or any response from that. So to me, I think that that has to be, for everything else to work, that this number should be going down as a concern, not going up. So it
Yeah.
makes me think there still needs to be a lot more reassessment, rework on this, and hopefully there's a lot more access to expertise. That one went down, so we're feeling that teams now have the expertise necessary to do it, so that's promising. And it really, that needs to be something by next year. I think I would love to hold hands with everyone and say we should see this as a number of the number one concern decline.
All right, let's look for it. Let's get you the Do Better coffee mug or motivational poster to put in your background. Do better. All right, let's zoom in on ad verification. This category is kind of having a moment right now with what's going on in the news around. There's this analytics report that is supposedly forthcoming. Double Verify kind of preempted it with a press release. This is against the backdrop of Oracle kind of exiting the space with Moat, and you have IAS sort of pivoting from kind of pure verification into targeting. And so things are in flux, to say the least. From a Mediaocean standpoint, we still think verification has an important role to play. You can see protected by Mediaocean right here in my little animation, which we've kind of relaunched into market to kind of solve what we're seeing here. And so as part of our trying to kind of understand which aspects of verification are most critical, that was the question we asked. So when you're evaluating return, selecting partners, what are you looking for? The top answer was a measurement, so MRC accreditation, robust reporting. The second was actionability, with the ability to use data for real-time decisioning. That was up 22% over our last survey. So that was kind of the fastest grower. And then the other three were integrations, channel coverage, and costs. And so, Brian, maybe starting with you, thinking about this category, why is it kind of come under so much scrutiny? Potentially could also tie it into, in the social world, you have like Meta kind of changing some of its policies around content moderation. So there's a lot of kind of noise around how content and brand adjacency are going to kind of work together in this new era, whatever era we're calling it. So how are you handicapping it?
Well, my general view is that, a lot of the products are flawed. And I guess that you speak to analytics. I haven't read, well, it hasn't even come out yet, right?
I don't think so, no.
So, okay, we have a Barbara Streisand effect here. I think that a lot of verification products are very flawed. The question you have to always ask when you're studying anything to do with the advertising industry and most businesses in general is a bad choice better than a worse alternative? And I think that generally speaking, these products are that. And that's to say they put you in a better position than you otherwise would be for using them, which is, I think, the ultimate test and arbiter for any service, frankly.
Yeah. Is that how you think about it, Deborah? Some people kind of compare it to like insurance where, you hope you never have to use it, but you're happy when you do. How do you think about it?
Well, yeah, I think it is one of those. I mean, like we said, it's going to be a fraught environment for marketers. So this helps to at least either try to avoid some, even if it's not perfect, but to avoid some, or at least give the marketing team and leadership a heads up about where there could be big challenges. And I think the products are. I'm not as negative as Brian, but he's a lot smarter than I am. So I'm gonna now I might have to go back.
I'm more ignorant
and
too,
look, but,
so
huh?
I'm more ignorant about a lot of these things. You've lived this in ways that I never have. So.
Yeah, well, again, I think, they definitely do a good job, and I would never go without them. And I think, again, and by the way, Brian wrote an amazing article on Meta and the latest changes there. I'm really concerned about what's going to happen this year
Yeah.
with everyone pulling back and say, oh, we don't need any more adults in the room. Like we can just think of do any of you have teenage boys? Like I've had teenage boys in my house. They're brutal. Like they need to learn social skills and how to effectively deal with each other without, being awful. And I feel like, you know, like Meta just said, okay, I give up. Everyone could just free for all. And we need adults, and we need some of that. So given that environment, which is clearly going to happen, under the auspices of free speech, which I mean, my son can tell me what he wants, but in the right way, right? Um, I think this and protection, protected by Mediaocean, the other areas are going to be even more important just to signal and to watch out because you're not going to know where a lot of the attacks are going to be coming, so you've got to be aware. And that's to me what these products do for you, and try to at least avoid some of it, and help because I think overall society still wants a conversation that's decent.
Yeah, and the brand safety is one component. There's also just the stuff that's just straight up fraud, and
Yeah.
invalid traffic. We don't know what the analytics report is because it hasn't come out, but the what we understand is that it's more related to catching the fraudulent traffic piece, and that is just a whole nother aspect of you think about bad actors and things, and they're it's clear nobody wants that. There's no dispute or ways to kind of slice that. And so again, these things become really important.
Yeah, and I see them like very intertwined. The bad actors, anyways, lots can go on there, so you don't want to see any waste. It's got to be both, and we still need adults, and we need things that set the format for what this industry really should and does do.
Here. We're going to speed through this last one. So we've got our 6 insight and then a couple of
Wait, are you saying we've gone through a presentation and we're leaving creative to the end, not media? Hey, that's a turnaround for media.
And yeah, Deb, this could be a chance to get out your do better mug again, because once again, we're still seeing that the overwhelming majority do not have fully synchronized processes. So, but we are seeing improvement. So we're calling this small strides, big opportunities. So we asked marketers how well synchronized their efforts are. 14% said they have fully synced their media and creative processes and technologies. That's up from 12% last time. So that's good, but can't rejoice too much. Long way to go. 40% said they have a formal approach, which is good. 36% said there's some overlap, leaving 10% with totally separate media and creative. So, we've been on a mission kind of to close this gap. That's the idea with, flash talking, integrating into Prisma for seamless workflow. We also just had, we'll share this in the readout at the end. I'm going to try and save like 4 or 5 minutes just to share a few QR codes and announcements. But we partner with Comcast Technology Solutions, CTS, to integrate Ad Fusion for creative trafficking. So these are ways that companies, platforms, partners can come together to help shrink this gap. But something also kind of has to change in the mindset. And so, Deborah, maybe to you, like what has to change for this gap to really close together?
Well, I'm encouraged actually by the recognition and the new tools and products that are available to help that. So, I think everyone needs to keep pushing further on that. And it seems like such an obviously creative doesn't work without the right channels and the media and knowing where it goes. So, um, I'm also hopeful that some of the things that are happening with the agencies and the consolidations, we saw Leo consolidating its Publicis and Leo Burnett. We obviously will have IPG and Omnicom, coming together. So I think that is a great opportunity actually to keep bringing things closer together without so much fragmentation in approaches. So I'm pretty optimistic about it for this year, and think it's really important.
Oh, Brian, you want to riff on that? Thoughts on whether it be the consolidation or take it any direction you want?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's still a big problem that most marketers budget for creative separately from media, and they're separate primary decision makers, not sole decision makers. among larger marketers, and that's what caused the not integration but disintegration. I think there's a great opportunity for independent media agencies to add creative because there's no internal conflict. It's harder for the holdcos to do that. I think every media agency at the holdcos would probably love to build out the creative offering and try to capitalize on it. But between the way clients have budgeted and the internal politics, it's going to be really hard for them to do what they can on this front.
So it all comes back to the marketers.
Basically.
There we go. And that's
always
probably the point to leave it on. And so we have this QR code. We'll drop the link in the chat to download the full report. We have, as I mentioned, slices of the report for each of the different verticals. So these are going to drop at the end of this month. Keep an eye out for that. As I mentioned, each of the individual sectors will have the data and insights bespoke so that you can get understanding for what's kind of happening in your industry, or if you're an agency and you work across multiple, collect them all. They're like trading cards. So good stuff there. This was an announcement we made at CES last week for anyone that missed it. Flash Talking is the first creative ad server to embed the RAMP ID in, so you can do things like personalization, optimization, as we move into this post-cookie world, or with cookies as long as they're still around. You can also use the RAMP ID to help direct your strategies. So hit that QR code. We're dropping the link in the chat. I mentioned this, so this was the our other announcement at CES, our partnership, or deepening our partnership with CTS. We've been working with them for some time, and now we've released a bi-directional integration between AdFusion and our advertising infrastructure, so that the data's shipping both ways, really helping solve a lot of the workflow challenges that we encounter when facing that creative media gap. So snap that QR code. The link is in the chat. What else do I have for you? Testing in a multi-ID world. So this is a playbook. We talked a lot about this and the kind of need to think about multiple forms of identity, kind of the waterfall among them. This is your kind of how-to guide for being able to kind of build that complete picture of your target audience, orchestrate campaigns to reach them, and measure the impact you're having. So grab that one. Hopefully everyone is either using their phones or copying and pasting these links. We'll include them too. We always send a summary email. You'll get a recording of this webinar, and we'll include the links in there as well. I've got one more for you, the hot topic of ad verification. We mentioned that Protected by Mediaocean is coming into this, taking kind of a new angle that flips the model from kind of negative to positive. And so you can read more about what that means and how it can help solve some of the challenges that we're facing in the space. Certainly encourage you to reach out to us to learn more about that solution and how it's embedded into our ad server and the broader stack. Look at this. We landed the plane on time. I want to thank both Brian and Deborah again. Really appreciate your time and insights. Thank you to everyone who joined us live. Thank you to everyone who will watch on demand, and we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.